Thank you so much, Claire. As said before, I'm Amelie Liu, co-director of events and alumni at the Yale Entrepreneurial Society and a first year in Berkeley College. So today I'm really excited to be chatting with the woman who democratized design for all of us. Jennifer Fleiss is the co-founder of Rent the Runway and has served on its board of directors since 2019. Jenny is a partner at Initialized Capital, focused on seed stage investing with a specialization on e-commerce enablement, consumer, and AI. Jenny is an intrapreneur and entrepreneur, founding two scaled digitally native businesses from scratch, Rent the Runway and Jetblack. Previously, Jenny co-founded Rent the Runway, a business that has transformed the retail industry by making designer clothing rentals a convenient and accessible luxury for millions of women. Jenny is on the board of Rent the Runway, the Lanvin Group, Shutterfly, and Yale Ventures, and is an advisor to and investor in various businesses, many with female founders. Jenny has been honored with numerous recognitions, including Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30, Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40, and Most Powerful Women Entrepreneurs, and Fast Company's Most Influential Women in Technology. Prior to Rent the Runway, Jenny graduated cum laude from Yale University in 2005 and earned her MBA from Harvard Business School in 2009. For the woman who allows us all to look like we're stepping off the runway, please welcome Jennifer Fleiss.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm so glad to be here.
So Jenny, we want to understand the underlying experiences that made you who you are today. We'll try to walk our audience through your life and help them soak up all of your incredible advice. But before we delve into your experiences at Yale, I'd love to start from really the very beginning. Can you share a pivotal moment or influence in your early life that set you on the path to where you are today?
Yeah, well, thank you for coming, and this is an amazing facility. We definitely did not have this when I was at Yale, so you're all very lucky, although I took my first course right in the auditorium over there, so this is special. So I grew up, I was thinking about this recently because I just started a business with my kids, and someone was like, well, did your parents do that with you when you were younger? And I was like, I guess like kind of, in that they were both like entrepreneurial, they were in the real estate industry, and they kept me very engaged in what they were doing. I would like go into the different buildings. I would see like my dad at work talking to people, managing things. We lived in one of the buildings that was like one of his buildings that he managed and rents it out. So it felt like there was just this entrepreneurial spirit, and also that like this freedom to believe that I could like do anything and that anything was possible, which I feel really grateful to have grown up with just that general ethos around me. And I'd say also with this ability to like really believe that you should love work and like that you could find something that you loved and you wanted to do. And some of that ironically was because my mother left her job as a lawyer because she didn't like being a lawyer. And so to have gone, she was the second graduating class of women at Yale. And then she went to Columbia Law School, and to have, worked her whole life and career towards like this goal of becoming, she was a lawyer at one of the most prestigious firms in New York, and then to decide after having her second child that she wasn't loving it enough, it wasn't worth the sacrifice of the time with her family and helping my dad in real estate, that she like bowed out of that ecosystem, that whole ecosystem and all the investment she had made up until that point, and that was okay, right? Like I think this ability to like, the freedom to fail or the freedom to like make these big hard choices or to not follow the prescribed path that was exactly like put in front of you. Like I've only kind of more just realized and started processing that was actually like quite freeing and empowering for me. And I'd say the other thing is like I grew up in New York City and I still live there and I'm raising my kids there. And I truly feel like it's a city of dreams. It's like the pace is like nothing else. The diversity, like the amount you consume and take in on a daily basis. And you guys are lucky, you're right near it. So like the energy, I'm sure, just exudes from afar and you can access it. But it's a great way to see like consumer behavior in a really dense format as well, just because there are so many people packed in. And so there's just like so much around you to witness and to see in action.
That's so interesting. I mean, how do you think the lessons that were taught to you about pivoting and resilience from your mom affected you later on, especially when starting Rent the Runway?
Yeah, I think, first off, like the permission to not follow the exact prescribed course where I graduated Yale and I promptly went to work in finance, which had felt like the template of success, much in the way that my mom, coming from like an immigrant family, like was like, go to Yale, be a lawyer, like checking all the boxes. And most of the prestigious people I knew in New York and people who were applying for those positions after college were like in the world of finance and investment banking. Like I did the summer internship at Goldman Sachs that everyone is like clawing for. And so I think the ability to say like, wait, is this actually like making me happy? Is this like fulfilling what I want to have in my life? And to say like, no. And to then say like, okay, let me reset, which is when I went to Harvard Business School. I think that was very much empowered and enabled by my mom. I had applied to law school because I think often when people aren't sure what to do, they go to law school, especially like if you're smart, like genuinely. And it was so ironic because I spent my whole life hearing about my mom being like how she hated being a lawyer and like, don't be a lawyer, whatever you do, don't be a lawyer. I'm sorry if there are lawyers in the room.
I'm personally thinking about being a lawyer.
So, and at some point though, but I was like, I'm applying to law school, but like, I don't want to be a lawyer. Like I kept saying that, and someone was like, that makes no sense. Like I knew I didn't want to be one, and yet I was applying for the background. And so I, like, late stage, I applied third round to HBS. Like I was into Columbia Law School. I hadn't even taken, like following literally my mom's path, right? Of like Yale, Columbia Law School, like living in New York. But I hadn't even taken like the GMAT at the time I got accepted to Columbia Law School. And I like hustled to do it and applied third round, which is so counter to my like type A personality. And, took that path. And like, that's where I met my co-founder, and like, here we are today.
Yeah, wow. So it sounds like there was a lot of changing within, your journey. So reflecting on your time at Yale, you studied political science, which is also something I'm currently thinking about. But if you could go back in time before Harvard Business School, before Yale, knowing you wanted to be an entrepreneur, would you change your path at all or even major?
I don't think so, honestly. I feel like I wish, I guess, that I knew earlier on that entrepreneurship like could be a job. Again, like it just wasn't as commonplace. So when I went to like career services at Yale, which like I still feel like I have work to do there, I need to visit them and meet with them, but it was like finance or consulting. And in part that's like because those are the firms that have the resources to come and recruit, and then it's like a bit of a self-selecting prophecy. But yeah, I think that I wish I kind of realized that earlier. Maybe I would have done something else other than work in finance and investment banking. But honestly, in hindsight, like it was a great foundational set of skills, so I don't regret it. I actually think one of the entrepreneurial like important skills and necessities is to just generally look at things with like gratitude and to feel good about the path that was taken, and to feel like, and that leads to optimism and just positivity, which like you really need in entrepreneurship. So I don't really wish that I changed anything, honestly. Taking political science courses here was actually, as I was like reflecting on it in this question, in theory, it doesn't really have to do much with anything related to entrepreneurship. But the reason I wound up in that major is because when I was in that auditorium right there, shopping Ian Shapiro's, survey lecture course, and like blown away by him, it was like you follow great people and like people who you can learn from and you want to be around. And when I looked, like I was debating on what to major in, and my mom, it was like such a great gift that she was able to say this. She was like, go through the blue book and like put a little sticky note on all the classes that you're most just genuinely excited about. And then just see like where most of the classes are, and like that's your answer. Because that's all a major is, kind of, right? Like, I mean, rarely I would be interested to see like how many people majored in something that's directly correlated with what they did. But if you're like, there's a lot of incredible professors who are at the top of their game, and there's a lot of courses I just genuinely want to spend my time on, then like that's one really, I think, valid way to choose your major. I had spent like my whole life up until point of getting here, like working basically to get into Yale. Like I had in my mind, like my mom went there and I loved it, and I had like visited, and when I was a kid, my parents had a house not too far, and they would like take me for dinner because it was really cheap at the dining halls here, like when I was a baby, and like they would come back here. And it was like finally this freedom of like, okay, now like I get to choose. It's not like what is being, told as the path. Yeah. So that was like another example of like freedom that I feel like she gifted me, and that this institution gifts everyone who goes here, right? Because the encouragement is to like explore and to not be vocational yet, and to like understand that like there needs to be time for that freedom.
That's so interesting. I feel like I'm only in my second semester at Yale, but I feel like there have already
You're
been...
so lucky. I'm genuinely really jealous.
I feel like there have already been so many moments that are gonna undoubtedly shape just my future and, you know, the path that I go on. Is there one experience that you feel like really sticks out to you within your Yale experience that really is that was instrumental in, you know, changing your path forward?
I mean, there's like a bunch, honestly, of experiences. The first, like, so I had gone to the same prep school from when I was 3 years old to 12th grade when I graduated. And so that was never a choice that I had. I also was with the same group of people largely. So this ability to like almost reinvent yourself, or to just like be, you know, who you are amidst a new group of people, was like really freeing and novel. And so I remember getting to Yale, and I went on the foot trip. And one of my footies actually was Jonathan Swanson, who started Thumbtack, which is just like wild. Unfortunately, I didn't invest in his business. But I think just like interacting with a new group of people that was like from super diverse just set of backgrounds and interests and personalities, and just like, I feel like I really remember for, I don't know, the first time in a long time, just being like, wow, there's so many cool, interesting people that exist in the world. And it's like everyone is like a gift that you get to just like unpack and unwrap. And you're like there hiking for days with people where you get to just like talk to them and have discussions. And I think it was like the first time I started feeling that like the best way to learn is like from like really the people around you. Like you learn through experiences and people around you even more than, you know, from the professor.
Yeah. I'm personally very jealous because I put foot as my number one and did not get foot, so
interesting.
I'm a little
Maybe
jealous.
It's become more popular, I don't know. But my first like memory of rejection in life, which like, listen, I'm lucky that this was the first because it was in college, was when I didn't get selected to be like a foot leader.
Oh,
but
I
it was
heard
also,
competitive.
it was like I needed that. I needed some like failure, it's
Yeah.
competitive. But also it was like another example, like similar to finance, where I'm like, I don't think I really wanted to be a foot leader. And yet I like wanted to because it was competitive and hard to get into. And I think it's really hard and important to like decipher in life, like what you really want versus what's like hard to get. So you want it. I mean, it's still hard for me. I remember like crying to my mom about it, and I felt so rejected and all this stuff. And she's like, Jenny, if like the worst thing in the world is that you didn't get selected to be like a foot leader, like we're doing pretty well, right? And I'm like, fair, right? So yeah, but I still remember it.
Yeah, no, I feel like as Yale students, we often, I don't know, I've had my fair share of experiences of crying over clubs I didn't get into or things like that. And I know as Yale students, I'm sure a lot of us in the audience can relate, there's this prevailing sense that we've got to have that like one big, you know, idea right away, despite understanding that there's actually a lot of time. So my question is, in your journey, was Rent the Runway your first idea, or was it your 27th? Please say it was your 27th. Or did it emerge through a process of just a lot of exploration and iteration?
Yeah. It was probably like my 100th and 27th.
Good.
I mean, my friends from college, first of all, I like was the kid who was running lemonade stands, but then trying to like create bundles to sell together. And like, that's how I wanted to spend every single weekend. And I had like, you know, my family was in real estate, so I'd like cornered the ideal real estate, and I would like have to insist on getting there like 7 a.m. so no one else took the corner, but like no one else ever was going to take the corner. But my college roommate, like who I'm still close with, always reminds me of just, you know, we were going out one night and like the heel of my boot broke or something, and she's like, and within like 5 minutes you'd like found duct tape that matched the color of the boot, and like we were out on the road, right? And and then like eventually it broke that night, and I decided it was going to be like a no shoes, like a shoes off party, and was convincing other people to like take off their shoes. So I think there's just been this tendency in me to like creative problem solving. Like entrepreneurship is really about creative problem solving. The passion and excitement when you see a problem, and like this like determination to find a way to solve it is, I just think, like rooted in me, and it gives me such energy. And that's a piece of like every day in the world of entrepreneurship. But after the little boot incident, no, I took a course here called Entrepreneurial Ventures. I worked on the Loo Light, which was like a light up toilet bowl illuminator with a girl who I'm still in touch with who actually works at a venture fund. She started a venture fund as well. And we didn't do really anything with the concept, but then I, from that course, like learned about patenting a product. And so there was a different product that I roped in a friend from another college to work on. It was like a tea bag that also had like a stir attached to it. And I patented that. I never did anything with that. But there was these moments of like, you can create, like this is doable. This is not insurmountable. It's not that hard. Like, wow, like I could just file a patent and now I know how. And examples that get discussed that show how people had, that were not too dissimilar or far along in their careers, like me, had gone and done things. So I think it was really empowering. I had a college essay editing business that I did while I was in finance. And then while I was at business school, I did like a whole field study course and formalized that business a little bit more. And then Rent the Runway came about while at business school.
Wow, so it sounds like you had a lot of big ideas. You've always been very entrepreneurial.
Some big, some less big.
Well, kind of on that topic, I feel like growing up, society tried to teach us really never to quit. But my dad kind of had the opposite view. He was like, if you're persisting down an unproductive direction, it's kind of a waste of your time. Mm-hmm. Him being an economist, like a very hardcore economist, he goes, okay, you need to learn optimal quitting.
I like that, optimal quitting.
Thank you. So in your view, how valuable is that principle when you're thinking about, you have a lot of big ideas, and based on your experience, what indicators or criteria do you use to kind of decide when to move on or when an idea isn't working?
I'm gonna rent that phrase from him, optimal quitting. I like it. I am really into optimal quitting. So what I say is like a principle like I live by, whether it's in starting businesses, investing, is like time is the greatest luxury. And so when people talk about doing an MVP, a minimum viable product test, for example, I'm like, you're not just doing this for the sake of like proving to investors that the concept works. Like you're really doing this because like you should see and be honest with yourself about if this works. So like get an MVP out there as soon as you possibly can, because every second you're wasting is just like your own time and like understanding if there's like a there. And maybe the first MVP doesn't work or it leads you to another one that you need to do, et cetera. It also shows you if the team, to the extent like you're working on something with a co-founder, are people you like to be around. Like, can you actually function and work together well? And so it's like the best real simulation to quickly get feedback of like, is this how you want to spend your time? And I think that's like really critical. And I think a lot of people in the startup world like don't think about it like that enough. I have a proposal out to my team at Initialized. I don't think they're as like into it, but I think it's really interesting that at any point in time, if one of our founders wants to quit and bail, we'll give them, I haven't finessed the numbers, but some meaningful amount of percentage of dollars left to give money back to everyone. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, I don't want a founder who is not all in, right? It's like what Zappos did for employees, where I think it was like the first 3 months, if you decide you don't want to be there anymore, you can like leave and take away $10,000 or something. Like you want the people who are like in it for the big win and hungry for the big win. And so like I think you need to, like if you are a founder working on something, I promise you, like for your own sake and honestly the investor's sake, if you're not in it mentally, emotionally anymore, or you've like tried too many avenues, and like try a bunch of avenues first, especially if you've gotten to the point of raising money. But then I think it's like a really humble, honorable thing to quit sometimes.
Well, speaking of founders and kind of, your partnership with Jennifer Hyman was, I think, a pivotal aspect of Rent the Runway's success. So for aspiring students who want to find a great co-founder, what qualities should they look for to ensure, there's a path to success and a shared vision?
Yeah, well, you're on like fertile ground, because I do think it's like being amongst really brilliant, like the self-selected group of what percentage of people get to like be here in this room. And so that already is a filtering mechanism. And then, for me, I met my co-founder because we were in the same section at business school, and business school is like case study method. And so like your whole day is learning from your peers as much as from your professor or more. And so you get to hear how people think about different businesses in different ways and the different perspective and lens, and whether you think they're smart or not. So it's like unwittingly this ability to like kind of interview and evaluate all of the like 90 people in the room around you. Jen came from a sales and marketing background. I came from finance consulting background. So there was like some complementary aspect of that. From a personality perspective, I think we both realized and like respected each other's personalities. And then there's just an element of like, first off, it was like lucky and chance that we were in the same section to begin with, and that we happened to have lunch on the day that we came back from, you know, Thanksgiving break, where she had some of the initial seeds that led us to starting Rent the Runway. But yeah, I think if you find complementary skill sets and probably some complementary personality aspects is important. Like I often find with co-founders, you have a big strategic visionary, and that for me was like my co-founder who has like sometimes an idea that you just feel like, okay, like it's a little bordering on crazy, but that's what it takes to be like a venture business. And then the other person who's like, how do we get from point A to point B? So like, okay, you want to democratize luxury. It's like, how do we raise some capital? Like, how do we get an intro to a VC? You know, it's like just breaking down all the steps and milestones to get there.
That's so interesting, and I'm so happy you brought up from point A to point B, because I was just very interested in, you know, you have so many big ideas. How do you make them tangible?
Yeah, sometimes the best thing is like not to overthink it and just like to put your head down and do the work. And so I think this like spirit of efficiency to some extent, because you are like risking your own time otherwise, has always been really important to me. And it's like a bit of what's the New York feel is like you're always behind, so like just keep running faster. Yeah, so I think that just like, I always say it's like there's the gift of being a little bit naive, especially in your first startup. And I do feel like Rent the Runway was my first like true real startup, certainly where we raised capital. And like I didn't take another job that I had lined up, like, you know, to go work on this full time. And yeah, like I think that we didn't realize how hard the business was gonna be. I remember our marketing professor, Young Mi Moon, who's like a very well-regarded marketing professor at Harvard Business School, was like, well, this is interesting, but like you guys are smart girls and like this is really hard. Like, why don't you go work on something together, like something else? And at the time we like, I don't know, I feel like we didn't really expect that we would have to build the largest dry cleaner in the US or like run a warehouse or like how extensive the reservation booking calendar is for reverse logistics and rentals. And like she was totally right, by the way, but because we were naive enough to just like put our heads down and one foot in front of the next, we were able to build, I think, a really defensible business that was like a venture scale, meaningful industry disruptor.
Well, speaking of challenges, I mean, you co-founded Rent the Runway during an economic downturn in 2009. And we all know, even us young folk who were only 4 years old in 2009, that this was really an incredibly difficult fundraising time. So I don't know, would you tell us more about that? And in particular, I saw a really interesting quote you said, that tougher fundraising conditions could be a forcing function for startups. So just tell me a bit more about that quote and how we can learn from your experience.
Yeah, let's see. So when we first started talking about the idea, it was November 2008. We launched 2009. And we felt that the recession was actually a really good thing for this business, but that it was like a recession-proof concept, because in economic downturns, people would be looking for ways to save money and be smart shoppers. And in economic upturns, people have like more events and more parties and more needs to rent dresses. So that was like a big plus for us. I think often also moments of economic downturn and change and whatnot is where innovation sparks. Like if you look at the course of history and where like a lot of really big ideas and industry shifts change, it's when the market's not doing great. And in our instance, we were trying to change and disrupt the fashion industry. At that time, fast fashion, Zara, H&M, Forever 21, was really the only category that was growing within the fashion industry. And so designers were hurting. Like they were much more open-minded in a very closed-minded industry than they'd ever been before about what did they need to do to grow their sales, to get, you know, still young blood, young customers in the mix, to kind of exist in this new world of social media, which at the time was new. And so I think that like that's an opening when things are on like unsturdy ground to innovate and to get the conversations that people might otherwise just be too like comfortable in their, you know, position to have. Fundraising during the time, I don't know whether like it was a particular, like right now and last year in particular was a hard fundraising environment. I don't know that it was particularly one way or another at that point in time, but I generally think like the harder the conditions are, like the more of a weeding out function it is, just generally for, you know, people who have a higher chance of like maybe making it generally, because like you're gonna live through, like we've lived through some harder times than that fundraising time, right? You're gonna live through like a lot of highs and lows and things that are really challenging. And so like, again, like your most important asset is your time. So it's like if you can't live through raising in a hard funding environment, then like chances are like maybe you're just saving yourself some time versus a few years later when the going gets rough, and like it's also hard to live through that.
That's super interesting. I mean, in terms of fundraising as well, it's also hard to get capital as a woman. Something that I thought was really interesting was a recent report published by the Harvard Kennedy School revealed that the 30-year average of all female founders' share of VC funding was about 2.4%, which compared to 2018 was almost identical. It was 2.3%. So as an aspiring female founder who will undoubtedly need capital in the future, what advice do you have for us in terms of getting capital as early stage entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to make sure you need the capital. So like, I don't think it's a given that you need capital. There's a lot of resources. Shopify was transformational. I think AI is so transformational. And it's like, raise money if you need to raise money. Otherwise, like take it as far as you can before you raise money. Now there's for sure, like, I mean, money can do a lot of things in terms of accelerating your growth rate. So like, it's a case-by-case basis, but first, like, do you need to and want to raise money? And then it's like, okay, well, who and what type of people do you want to raise money from? Especially your first round, like you can go to friends and family, you can do it from like angels, or you can go to venture funds. And then within that, there's safe notes and there's convertible notes and there's different vehicles that you can raise. It's gotten a lot more founder-friendly than when we were raising. So we went out and we raised a price round. We raised from Bain Capital Ventures. We were able to get through them through a lawyer who we found, and we like pitched to the lawyer, and he gave us his services on like a deferred contingency fee of like if we raised the first round. So he was incented to help us raise the round, but he obviously believed in us after pitching to him to think there was a good chance. He knew like all of the senior partners at these different firms because he was the venture lawyer. So that's like what they do, is work with these guys all the time, and he had a layout of like who was interested in this space, so he could also direct us categorically to who might be a better partner. So I always recommend that. Like we talk about him like he was our sports agent. So that was the first step, but it was like creative problem solving to like figure out a route to these investors that was different than 100 other HBS students who probably email them every single week, right? And then once we found a group of investors to pitch to, getting male investors, which the stats have gotten better, but it's still the vast minority of venture investors are women, to understand and appreciate like a very female-centric business was very hard. And I still remember like we're coming up on the Super Bowl, and I still remember we would start every pitch, like never do the first pitch, do the first pitch with one that's like a layup or you don't care about as much, but then you kind of start to see like when you mention the term accessories and like the VC's eyeballs are like, what's an accessory? You're like, oh, we need to do a better job of like knowing our audience and like setting the stage. So we would start, like back to the Super Bowl, we would start our pitches with this like little video, which was like a commercial, and it was basically these guys like opening a closet, and it was like full Heineken, and it was like at the Super Bowl, and they were like, oh my, it was like this like life change, like so excited. And then it was like a group of women opening like their closets, that like wardrobe kind of, so just like the emotional connection that women have with fashion was like the point. And it's just like, it's not just about functionally, tactically getting a dress for a good value. It's like how you feel when you put on that dress and you feel like you can take over the world, and the way that women get excited about having new things and putting themselves together and the confidence that it can bring. And we started then doing customer testimonials where, like I always say, show, don't tell. So like from the voice of the customer themselves, talking about and seeing and feeling like the power of it. And it was useful because what we started to see too was typically when the men didn't understand, is there like a real customer need here, would this work, they would go and ask their assistants, or they would ask their wives, or like maybe their kids. And none of those people were in our target demos. Like their wives probably didn't need to rent products. Their assistants were usually not in our target demo from an age perspective, and then their kids were younger, so we didn't really want that to happen. So we're like, let's show, don't tell who our customer is, and like the feelings that they have around this product, and that's what we're renting, is this like Cinderella moment with fashion. And so that was, I'd say, the big unlock for us as we started pitching to men. And like, listen, because there's fewer women pitching, like that can also be a really big advantage. Like we just owned it. We wore dresses, not suits to meetings. We like stood up. I don't even know if you're supposed to stand up, but we like stood up in the front of those rooms and pitched, and we like just did it our way. And I think the two biggest things I see with women is often there's not enough confidence that they bring into a room, and so like getting out of that shell, and then relative to men. And then the other is they often don't like push and dream big enough, meaning that like, do you want to go raise money to democratize the fashion industry and democratize luxury, or do you want to start a dress rental business? It's like, we want to like democratize the fashion industry, like, and how you're going to get there, or exactly what that looks like no one knows. These VCs know whatever you put out there is going to be wrong, but like when you size the market, size it based on like the global rental market of everything, and then you can show like, okay, here's the first piece that we're going after, and that's already still pretty big, right? And let them do the math. But showing that you're a big thinker like that is like what you need to like have a VC invest in the business and believe that it can like return the fund.
So it sounds like constructive problem solving has been, a big thing throughout your entire journey. And I know a lot of us have probably made mistakes or missteps, but would you be willing to share maybe a mistake or misstep that you took through, during your journey and how you dealt with that?
Yeah. So I spoke to a founder today that had a similar thing, and as many do, which is like didn't have technical experience and technical background. And so when we started Rent the Runway, we didn't have fashion experience or technical experience. And we started a fashion tech business, and what turned out to be a logistics business, which like I also didn't have logistics experience or dry cleaning experience before. So we, were immediately trying to find people in, the world of fashion and then also the world of technology that we could learn from and partner with. And for a while in technology, we tried to find like a technical co-founder and had some conversations with the very few people who had that background at HBS. And after like enough time of like trying to either find a co-founder or hire someone, and we like didn't, we had raised this capital, and so the clock and the runway was like ticking, and so we found an agency, and we did a whole request for proposal process where we had the like most buttoned up set of requirements documents, and we had thoughtfully negotiated the contract and all this stuff. And the team we had selected was in Canada. They were based in Canada, and we were paying what was in theory, I think, for like 9 engineers time, with like a really strict deadline where we needed to launch by holiday, because we knew people like had a real use case and that would be a big season. And like if you miss that, like maybe summer weddings, but like you weren't going to have the same initial like pop and excitement. And so we had planned to launch in October, and like we weren't getting much in the way of feedback or like anything from the developers. And like I definitely still like, the mistake and the error was like not going there soon enough. But eventually like I went there and showed up at the office like 11:30, and there was like one person there, and then like half an hour later like another person showed up, probably because his friend like called him. But it was definitely never 9 people. I don't think that office could fit 9 people. And even like sitting behind their screens and kind of like show me and like let me see what you've done, and asking what like who cares if they're dumb questions or not, like you're paying them to work on this. This is like mission critical for your business. It was like this reminder of like, when you keep stuff close, I think especially early on, it can be really helpful. But also like if anything is mission critical to like the success of your business, you cannot outsource it fully, especially in the beginning. Like you were just like risking so much. So in that meeting, like in that trip, I had to like fire that team like basically on the spot. We lost our initial like $40K deposit, which was like, this is one of the first impressions we're making on Bain Capital Ventures as our investment fund, right? We're like, we fired them. We also, like around the same time, wound up firing the designer who had done the initial designs for what our branding and site was gonna look like, because I like woke up in the middle of the night just feeling like it felt too Roxy Quicksilver. It just didn't feel aspirational, it didn't feel right. And I woke up that morning and I was like, we need to change everything in this way. Like that was like another $40K that like we lost, and the guy ultimately like sued us. Like, so we were making like a lot of what felt like missteps early on, but I was still like, I'm a creative problem solver, and I'm like not one that's gonna take no for like a deadline answer. And so I found an outsourced team in India, but they had a local person on the ground who I hired to basically build the website in like essentially a month. And we had the wireframes and the visuals and some of that, but like they were cranking and they got it done. And it was like total spaghetti code that we ultimately had to redo. And there was for sure bugs when we launched, but it was like we set a hard like launch by date, and I was on them every single day and then some. And I hired 2 other engineers in-house to like help me be on them and like hawk them and everything. And yeah, we got it done.
That's super interesting. I think something that I hear a lot just being in the entrepreneurship space is that being technical is really important, and that you need to have, you know, some sort of like computer science background or technical background. And so I guess my question to you is, you studied political science. Do you think you need to have a technical background now to, you know, go into entrepreneurship?
So I think the answer that you want to probably hear or suspect you would hear is like, no, you don't have to. And like clearly for many businesses, you do not have to. And like I did it without a technical background. That said, like I wish I had a technical background and that I took more courses in that area, whether it was to avoid the situation and have the confidence to like ask more questions or hire correctly from the get-go, or to have more of a network of other classmates who I knew to like help me gut check things, or to like leverage their networks to meet other people and have someone as a technical co-founder. I think it's getting harder even than it was then. Like, of course, there are certain businesses where, especially with Shopify and with AI, like you can actually totally not be technical and it's fine. I think at this moment in time, like I am seeing like a lot of technical founders because of the moment of where AI is in, where it's just still this new technology, and some of the biggest venture backable ideas are like touching that landscape where like being pretty technical is a bigger advantage than it has been in different moments of time. I do think by the time many of you graduate, we'll kind of get to a place where like the AI is more of like, it's an enabler, and you have like a lot of low code platforms already, and it'll just let you do more things without the technical background. But I think if you're in a learning environment where you have access to like, even you can audit the courses, because I like never really wanted to ruin my GPA with stuff. So it's like, I get that, but like go audit the courses, or like join a club that relates to that. Or if you're in YES, like I'm sure there are people who are technical, and like befriend them. Because it's also about like the complementary skill set. So I think you can also very well like be a founder and find a co-founder or pair up with someone who complements your skill set. And most engineers don't have the like sales and marketing or like extroverted often gene as much. So there's like, I think that's a completely legit path as well.
That's really interesting. I mean, something that I find really inspiring about you is that you span from studying political science to also being a founder, and now you're an investor as well. So how do you think having, you know, done all of those things, having, you know, the lens of being a previous founder will influence your investing in the future?
Let's see, the lens of being a previous founder. I think like, so I was largely inspired to be an investor because our first investor was like such a meaningful part of our journey. Like I often say, he deserves the title co-founder. And he had come from a founder operator background. And we were one of the first deals that he did after joining Bain Capital Ventures. And I was able to see like how genuinely helpful he was, and how the fact that he had like been in it, in the trenches, let him like relate to us, let us respect him in a different way, and let him just be like so instrumental as we built. And so it made me like really believe in that model, and to like have that seed planted in my head that eventually it would be an interesting career path for me. I'd say especially because I do have this like serial entrepreneur gene in me, where like I need to constantly, like I'm constantly thinking of new concepts and new ideas. And when you're at a startup, and eventually when I left Rent the Runway, for example, it's like at some point it's about scaling more of the same, and the opportunities to like, I introduced retail, I introduced subscription, I ran our logistics, I started our dry cleaner. At some point it's like you have the main building blocks, and it's just like optimizing those things. And then that's where for me it gets a little bit less fun, honestly. And then it's, you know, it's cost cutting, and like a lot of more, you're managing a lot of people, and so it doesn't let you move as quickly. And so I think that self-awareness that I like gradually built was like, okay, well, if I have the ability to like drop into a lot of different businesses that are often like at the early seed stage to begin with, like that could be a really good fit. But I also think like it's really cool that we can have jobs that are composition of things, like that I get to be on boards and a mom and start a thing with my kids while I'm also being a seed investor. So that I've had different chapters in my career, but like are different things. It's like fun, not for everyone, but like my personality is I like to do a lot of different things. And so it's been fun to like wear that hat, and who knows if I may start something again in the future, like, I don't know, but this has like been really incredible right now.
I mean, that's amazing. You're like a founder, you're an investor, you're a mother. How do you prioritize your time and your goals? I mean, you're doing so much.
Let's see. Well, I do think it is one of my things that I'm most maniacal about, or just like kind of naturally good at. I'm like pretty good at delegating. I have like a pretty natural ability to prioritize things. Sometimes what's a strength is a weakness too. So I think it often leaves me to be like kind of tough on people that I work with, because to me a lot of it comes really naturally. And I think like it's otherwise, a much more has to be an intentional or learned skill in some ways. And I saw that like come to life with my co-founder a little. Like you learn so much from each other, and she is like one of the two best salespeople like I've ever seen in the world. She's incredible at selling, and I learned so much in that department from her. She is much less good at some of the like tactical execution pieces. She's actually pretty good at prioritization, but like I think you learn from people who you're around, and that's where it goes back to like being around, surrounding yourself with great people and learning from people around you is the most important thing. You're having kids also layers another like forcing function of prioritizing on, because it's like you want to spend time with the kids. You start realizing like there's such limited time, like literally like half your time. If not in the beginning, like probably more, like just feels like it's taken away. So like you really like have this forcing function of prioritization on top of what already existed in the busy world of a startup.
So you talked about being maniacal, having delegating skills, and you serve on the boards of Rent the Runway, the Landman Group, Shutterfly, and Yale Ventures. So what do you look for as a board member in young entrepreneurs in terms of characteristics and just like human capital characteristics as well?
Well, hopefully if you're, I guess you can be a young entrepreneur, but if you're early on, hopefully you don't have a board is the first thing. Like you don't need a board. But what I look for in founders who are pitching, I typically ask like a question when I'm talking to a founder or interviewing someone of like, name 3 words that describe yourself. And like what I'm looking for is like, there needs to be optimism, there needs to be humility, there needs to be a sense of gratitude. And I think like those are some of the traits, flexibility, like those are some of the traits that I think really connect to people who will be able to be successful founders. Like there's so many highs and lows. You need that optimistic lens to carry your team, to weather moments like COVID for a dress rental business, which was like insane to think that like people didn't need to get dressed every day. We always pitched like, of course, like there's only like 3 things you need to do in the world, like eat, drink, and eat, sleep, and I guess drink, and get dressed. And all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, like you don't need to get dressed anymore. So yeah, I think like being able to have the skill sets that show like flexibility to do a lot of different things, wear a lot of different hats, and that the humility to be accepting of doing that. Like chief garbage disposal person, like everyone had their garbage takeout day for the first year of the business, right? And like that was a thing. And then that you have the like positive energy and aspect that people want to be around, that encourages them to work hard, but also that lets everyone, I think, just enjoy their time. Because again, at the end of the day, like you want to enjoy the people who you're around. You want to enjoy what you're doing. And if you have people who aren't like optimistic and positive energy, it's like just not that fun to be around. Life's too short.
You mentioned, maybe starting another business later on. So what drives you, and what are you still hoping to achieve? I mean, you've already achieved a lot, but you still have a lot of time.
Like consumers drive me. I think when consumers have like a need or tell me that there's a need, that's what drives me. So often that's empowered by like when you're the consumer as well. So you immediately like relate to the need, and it feels like you have that connectivity and you totally get it right away. But all the businesses I've started, like I have been the end consumer, and it was all spurred on by just these like waves of so many consumers being like either yes, that needs to exist, or like just being fanatical about the concept to the point that they like wanted to shout about it from the rooftops, and therefore like the word of mouth marketing flywheel also took hold. And I think there's like nothing cooler than seeing a customer like using your product, and like I still get chills every time I see Rent the Runway bags in the wild, and all of the things. And so like that's a really cool thing that we get to like do as entrepreneurs, at least if there's like a consumer. I mean, even if there's a B2B company, you can find ways of getting that energy, I think.
In terms of pursuing new companies, do you look at it from the aspect of you are the consumer yourself, or do you look to create companies for other people? How does that
Yeah, I have to look at both now. I mean, I think I'm much faster on the learning curve when I am the core consumer, and sometimes it's more fun for me to work on. So I naturally will gravitate towards some of that. But like when you're starting, like I think as an operator founder, like that's a whole, like there's a chunk of like who I am as a mom, as a person that lives in a city, like there's all those pieces. And then I think when you're starting and building a business, there's all these things you start to like build on, all the relatable elements of like what you needed to make a business successful. That leads to a whole category of like B2B business opportunities or B2B2C. So like I think the relatability just like compounds with the more experiences and the more different things that you do in the world. So there's like a really broad range of stuff that I actually do feel connected to as a consumer. That said, like I for sure have looked at businesses that fall outside of that, especially at the seed phase. It's like about the founder. So it's like if I get a referral to a founder that's from like someone I really like and trust, even if it's in a totally different industry, like I'll take that call, take that conversation. And I'll often like start flat out by being like, I do not know about this category, I do not know about this industry, like please work with me through these like painful discussions. The way I wish I had teed up those early technology discussions for Run at the Runway. But like it's a cool chance to learn and to scale a learning curve. And like you usually know more than you think you know, and the questions aren't dumb, they're usually like interesting and important, and anyone who's a good founder should be able to explain someone who knows zero about the space what it is. So it's a great actually kind of like forcing like function to weed some stuff out. But yeah.
Well, also, I mean, congratulations on your new and exciting role at Initialized Capital.
Thank you.
What's really exciting about this role, and what made you start there?
Yeah. So I'd say the thing that's actually the most exciting is, well, like literally my job. So Initialized is a seed fund. We invest in businesses when they usually are like post-product, but they've got some traction from consumers. We're investing like 3.5 million is our average check size, and we take like at least 10% of the business. I feel like my job is to listen to people tell me how they're going to change the world every day, and then to like maybe get to be a small part of having them do that, because they're going after these really big visions. So that's super cool. But I think the piece that like I feel is really special above everything is honestly like I went through a whole process in my own career evaluation that I kind of think I never had actually fully gone through as much in deciding to wind up at Initialized. So like I talked about how I was plopped into the world of finance even though it wasn't the right fit. I'd say in business school it definitely made me like stop, slow down, and be much more reflective of what I wanted to do. But like Run the Runway pretty quickly took on a role of life of its own, right? And then right from there I was recruited to start a retail tech incubator for Walmart, and I started a business for them. So I didn't feel like there was like that many moments of being able to like stop and be as reflective and intentional. I was more being opportunistic. And when I wound up joining a fund I was at before Initialized, it was a growth equity fund. And I went by my principle of like follow great, interesting people who you can learn from, and like I totally did. But I hadn't done, I think, enough work of like what was the long-term right thing for me, including like did I want to operate or did I want to invest? And so I spent like about a year where I pulled back some of my time at the other fund, told them I was going to be looking for something else, to like try to have a ton of conversations, talked to a lot of different people, spoke to and met probably like 100 different funds, which now is also great for networking. But it was interesting because I was actually looking at both operating and investing roles, because I narrowed down that like what I cared about most were working around awesome, really smart people who are like also good people I like to be around, having an in-person presence. So like my other fund had been in Boston, and like I like having people and energy in person around me. And then having just like an entrepreneurial startup type vibe and energy. And there's very few funds that have that. And I think because Initialized is all former like operators and builders, that contributes to it, because the pace is really fast just based on the size of our fund being pretty large and the number of partners not being that large. We need to like make pretty fast decisions. And like early on with seed stage, like it is about the person, it's about the founder. So like you're able to do that. You don't have a ton of data to go off of anyway. And so like using your gut intuition and spidey sense like really matters a lot. And so I felt like I could find those three things potentially in operating or potentially in the world of investing. And it was just really about finding the specific right opportunity. And I do think there's like only a couple of funds that would have checked all those boxes for me in the investing bucket. And so I feel glad that I did that self-reflection, that work. It was a painful year. It was scary because I had always had like a path before. And like I think it's really like now I get to see that it's like feels really good. It feels really right, and it's like paid off.
Well, as a final question, and I'm sad that our time is coming
Yeah, this
to
has
an
been great.
end.
You're such a good job.
Thank you. Well, if you were a student at Yale again today, how would you navigate your journey, and which skills would you prioritize, and how would you allocate your time?
Let's see. So you are so lucky. So I'd say the first thing is I start with like trying to like have this daily like gratitude of like, oh my God, I'm at this like amazing campus with these awesome people around me, and I worked so hard to get here, and to just kind of like have that almost daily reminder. Like I do miss it so much. It was so special, and it still like I think remains this like special memory, and the friendships are so special. So I mean, I genuinely think the main thing is like enjoy your time. Like yes, I could tell you like network. I could tell you to like leverage different professors and people who in the ecosystem and the database to like meet people that could be useful and relevant to you, and like sure, like maybe I think you can also do that later. Like I do think it's like undergrad is like, I don't know, it almost feels like this is like this very rare special like intermediary moment in life where you get to like, I don't know, exist in a cerebral, like play around, meet people, like think of, like have deeper thoughts that aren't as tactical. I think that's really special. I do wish that I took different internships that were like, had lots of different variables over the summer. Like I did mostly finance internships, and it's not just the industry. It's like, can you work at a small company and a big company? Like, can you like test out for size in different cities also, right? I think often people are like, their family somewhere or they're dating someone and they're like, but it's like, it's 2 months, like go try something else. Like it's your chance to test and learn and try that you may never have. Like it's really hard to move once you have kids or once you meet who you might actually marry, which like probably isn't the case of whoever you're dating in college. So like that's definitely one. Like don't, by the way, even if you think you're going to, because I have lots of thoughts on that too. But yeah, so I think like take the time to like try different things and test and learn. I mean, that is the most entrepreneurial thing of all, right? It's just testing and learning and failing and iterating and like figuring out more about like who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what feels good or not. I think those are the main things, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.